possible. My name is Emmanuel Wa-Kyendo, and I'm asking all kinds of questions now concerning society, civilization. Now, um, one question that is on my mind, and maybe it could be on yours, is if you look around the African continent, maybe even around the world, maybe you're in a trouble spot somewhere. Institutions seem to be crumbling. You seem to be getting the short end of the stick. The monopoly of violence is being used outside the bounds of the rule of law. Finding yourself, maybe it's been 30 years and your fortunes have barely changed. Maybe it's been 30 years and the fortunes of your parents have barely changed. So you look and say, no, it cannot be. This cannot be my future. I cannot just be 25% wealthier in 30 years, like is true for Kenyans. The average Kenyan is only 25% wealthier than he was in the early 90s. That is quite a negative prospect to be staring at. So I asked the question, how do societies fail and succeed? Now, this is another different models by some different historians. I believe there's Jeremy Diamond is in here. Let's go. Why is it important to conceptualize this anyway? Because we need a framework to think about the process of reform. We need a big picture view, a view that can help us to go into the weeds when we need to, but then come back out and see the full picture. Go into the forest, so to speak, and then come back out and say, okay, fine, we've been to the woods, but what are we actually trying to do? So societies fail when they do not adapt to change. Societies fail when they lose in the race between solutions and problems. Now, maybe you've seen my previous video on Arnold Toynbee. So this is an exploration of what other social scientists have to say. So, you could think about the problems facing society in terms of like the different dimensions of human life. Problems could emerge in the social sphere. Problems could emerge in the political or the economic sphere of human life, right? Problems could emerge from the environment or relations with friendly or hostile neighbors, right? So this is a pretty comprehensive list of the challenges that a society can face. You know, how do I deal with the changing climate? This is not just modern man that has had to face this, but throughout history, different periods. Maybe it's a global climate thing happening, or a localized climate issue, localized environmental issue. The Egyptians, for example, had to rely on the River Nile. So they were especially concerned by anything that would happen in the environment that would affect the flow of the Nile. They relied on it for their civilization. So, why do societies fail? Societies fail because they're not prepared. They fail to anticipate problems before they arise. For example, you might be asking, where is your Mandela right now? Your Mandela, wherever he is, needs to anticipate problems before they arise. And if they anticipate problems successfully, why do societies fail to perceive problems when they arise? So you could anticipate that, okay, you know what? We're going to need is it storm drains and levees for, you know, some big storms. But then imagine a society that prepares for the storm, but then fails to perceive, right, whatever that freak climate event is. So that concerns the problem of readiness. And if they perceive problems when they arise successfully, why do they fail to act? Why are they not alert? And when they act, why do they fail to act successfully? Yes, I can see the hastiness with which I prepared the slide. Now, I was really excited. I needed to. So, pardon me for the bullets and the combination of bullets and numbers. Now, parallel to this is a question that is explored in literature. Now, what specific book was this? It might have been, let's see, was it Those Who Yearn for You Too? No. Now, just give me a second. I thought that it was important to point out what book was being discussed. The video that inspired this list for me. All right, I'm going to have to look for it another time. Why does a society desire not to make decisions? Right? Now, evil can be defined in so many ways, but here I want to define it as, escape as soon as you're not looking at what's actually happening in the world and confronting the darkness around us. I think that that's one way that we can detect that there's some evil afoot. Failing to just see that you could have a school for the mentally or physically challenged. That's a school run by the state, but this school doesn't have enough money. You have a parent of this child who cannot afford to care for their child. They don't have their neighbors, people within society don't even have the time or the bandwidth to care for them. They're too busy trying to make ends meet. The state itself is stealing so that these people can't even be taken care of. And then the wider society refuses to see what is happening, to look at the problem, to look and feel what the problem is asking you. What is this problem asking me? What is this thing trying to say? People talk about purpose all the time, but fail to see that there's always purpose everywhere around us. There's something meaningful to engage with. Sometimes it's too much meaning, too many problems. But the problems are there nonetheless, but we fail to look. So, when a society doesn't want to make decisions, you're yearning for utopia. You don't want to have to make moral choices and live with the consequences as a society. It could also apply to individuals. Maybe I'm failing to make a moral choice somewhere. Why do societies fail to make decisions beforehand? Right? You've got to, sometimes the moral choices are so intractable, meaning you can't get a grip on it. For example, you want to propose a total revolution, but never stop to think, is this a simplified solution? Have I simplified the problem? Have I chosen an easy way out? Why do societies wait until the decisions are forced upon them? Right? Decisions are inevitable. So, then societies that fail on all those fronts will suffer the consequences. Sometimes, because of failing to make decisions, then values are legislated. Because we abdicate at an individual and community level, then it's up to someone else to decide for us. And so we elect people and they start to tell us what's right or wrong, and they start to legislate it. I mean, there's a degree to which it's sort of necessary, but how much of it is truly necessary? Can't we handle our own affairs in some domains? localize them? Should we? What about the ones who carry our sins? We could choose to stay with the consequences or walk away and forget, pretend it's not happening. Select scapegoats. Oh, our leader. If only we had better leaders. This is something that's a often repeated limerick rhyme statement by, say, African elite. If only we had better leaders. But no one ever asks how we should be organized ourselves. Now, resolution. So, a society can either resolve problems by choice, take remedial action for relatively pleasant resolution of problems, or endure painful experiences like war, disease, starvation, right? So, by choice, we take up again the framework we posited earlier. Take remedial action for pleasant resolution of problems. How? Anticipating problems before they arise, right? Being prepared, perceiving problems where they arise. Hey, something is happening. And then acting to solve those problems and perhaps acting successfully. Look, the Netherlands, it's just, they've built levees, dams, and all kinds of systems to resist the worst kind of a storm in 1,000 years. You sit down on your computer, do some probability and some very thorough modeling and say, whatever is the worst storm that we can anticipate in 1,000 years, we are ready for it. So that's a very good example of how a society can actually prepare for a disaster. Remember, the Netherlands is located, it could easily be flooded by the sea, and they have taken action to reclaim some of the land from the ocean. Sorry, not the sea. And not only have they reclaimed land, but they have prepared for the worst storm, showing that a society, if it so desired and was so organized, and could actually prepare for the worst. A democratic society at that. So, first, in order to take remedial action, a society needs to resolve the problem of conflict of interest. You have your ruling elites that are not exposed to the problem, so their short-term interests of elites need to be bound together with the long-term interests of society. Second, the society needs to be brave enough to resolve conflicts of values. Society needs to be willing to reconsider its core values. A society needs to have the courage to make painful decisions about the values it holds. Hey, maybe it's not a good idea for African countries, for the elites, both living within the continent and abroad, to abdicate their duty and not hold their representatives to account. To believe that the problem of building institutions and nations is a problem of morality, which it could be true, and failing to see the problem of incentives and disincentives that are usually provided by the population through public accountability. Holding those guys, watching what they're doing all the time. So it's not just their fault that they're doing bad. Maybe it's our fault too. Maybe this value of sitting back and letting them do all the work is just a value that needs to be dropped. Now, you can name all other kinds of values, but you got to make painful decisions about these values. Which values formerly serve the society well can continue to be maintained, and which ones should be replaced? Now, what about anticipating problems before they arise? So you know that you're depleting resources. You know that. Why can't you prepare for the eventuality conditioned by the eventual loss of those resources? What about changes in demographics? Why can't you prepare for those changes? Why can't you plan to educate your population? Right? Then you solve the problem of perceiving the problems as they arise and solve the problem of acting. Right? So, what you could say is whoever is thinking about reforms for all these different African countries will need to consider a framework. This is really simple framework, because you're just talking about readiness, preparedness, how alert you are. But you don't really see it as a feature of discourse, because we need to say, where are we? Where did we fail to anticipate this problem? What can we see around the corner? And this is true on the economic dimension, in science, in medicine, in healthcare, in defense and security. All these things is true. It was possible, for example, to anticipate a pandemic and to ask if we are prepared for it as a poor country. It was possible to ask, for example, that what happens if donor funding is withdrawn, where you maybe have a health system that is reliant on donor funding. So that's it for today. Thank you very much for tuning in. Let's talk.